weeks since nationwide protests broke out in Iran. But it isn't the first time we have seen protests over Iran's regime and religious leaders. So why are these protests different? Fatima Shams is a Persian studies professor and exiled writer from Iran. She says it's important to know how the recent protests started to understand why they are different.
The protests start from the heart of the bazaar in Tehran. Also tells us that the economic grievances that we have been talking about are no longer sustainable in the sense that they have completely disrupted the everyday life of the people.
And then they quickly exploded beyond economic concerns to political ones.
You see small towns going up against the regime that used to be the bastions of the regime. The bazaar, the market, the traditional heartbeat of the Iranian small industries and trade, historically a bastion of financial help for the clergy, they are angry.
That's Abbas Milani, an Iranian-American historian. He says the expansive protests across rural and urban areas don't point to a push for a particular policy like they have in the past. Instead, they are calling for widespread regime change that's led by Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei.
Now, the demands are death to Khamenei and end to the regime. Last but not least, the regime is now at its weakest point.
Abbas says that weakness stems from the 12-day war with Israel last June. During that war, the US bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites, and the government took a serious hit, with a loss of allies Syria and Lebanon.
The regime's second most powerful person after Khamenei, his name was Qasem Soleimani, he led Quds Brigade. He was assassinated. The regime never imagined that anyone in the region, US and Israel, would dare do that to him because he had created this image of omnipotence. They killed some of the top Iranian generals working for the IRGC on Iran's nuclear program. All of that regionally and locally weakened the people's image of invincibility.
And Shams says the regional isolation that followed led to a lack of trust in the government.
People realize that this is a government that has taken away their social freedom and their basic human rights, and not only is not able to meet their most basic expectations and needs, but it's also a government that leaves them alone in the time of war.
And the scale of response from these protests from the regime is another thing making them different from the past. First off, the death toll compared to previous crackdowns on protesters is far higher. One report suggests over 2,500 Iranians were killed. However, numbers are hard to verify. Other reports suggest that the death toll could be as high as 12,000. According to Reuters last Friday, Iran's judiciary chief vowed that punishment for the protesters will be decisive, maximum, and without any legal leniency. Plus, the regime has also responded with its most sophisticated digital blackout ever.
Churchill used to talk about the Iron Curtain. The regime has really, literally tried to create a digital Iron Curtain.
One independent monitoring group shows that Iran's connectivity dropped starting on January 8th, essentially cutting off the majority of all communication to outside the country. And because this technology is more sophisticated, workarounds like using a VPN are increasingly difficult. The most reliable method is using a satellite like Starlink. However, Shams says having access to Starlink is incredibly risky.
This time, people are being tracked down, and there has been security guidelines circulating in the social media that people have to follow in order not to be tracked down.
So is the international response different this time? Well, US President Donald Trump has threatened to intervene beyond sanctions, which have been used in the past.
If they hang him, you're going to see some things that I don't know what where you come from and what your thought process is, but you'll perhaps be very happy. We will take very strong action. If they do such a thing, we will take very strong action.
But it's not clear if a US military intervention is likely, as Trump hasn't given any details. And while there have been years of protest in Iran, none have toppled the government. But could it be different this time? The regime doesn't seem to be backing down, but both Shams and Milani believe this won't stop Iranians.
The situation on the ground is a mixture of horror and shock. people are scared of leaving their houses. I don't believe that the government has been able to crush people's hope and determination for change. But this is a regime that is armed head to toe and has no limit and no red line.
The problems that begot people to come into the street, the economic dislocations and poverties and inequalities, that's going to remain. So even if they do kill their way into temporary silence, there will be, I think, a new cycle of resistance